I first request, first of all, the speakers will make brief presentations. And Dr. Ayesha Jalal is much more interested in interactive session, and I fully agree with her. And I hope that she will cut short her longer lecture and will come to just 5 to 7 minute speech. And Dr. Akmal Hussain has a longer presentation. He will also be cutting on that so that awam se sikha jaye. Let us learn from the people. And they are not people also. Thank you very much.
Want me to speak for 5 minutes?
Please, that's 7 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Imtiaz Alam Saab. I have had 4-day notice to give a keynote lecture, which was meant to be for 30 minutes. Now it's going to be 5 minutes. You want to change your mind? I'll make it to 2 minutes.
No, I have 15 minutes. Come on.
Well,
You should prepare.
well, I mean, in 4 days, it's hard to prepare a keynote lecture. When I'm asked to give a keynote lecture, I'm given a lot of more time. But given the subject and everybody has ideas on it, I thought it would be a better idea to just set it up for you, and so that we can be more interactive, and there are people here who would like to add or subtract from what I've said. Well, on the occasion of the 65th independence anniversary of India and Pakistan, first of all, happy birthday, Pakistan and India. In the early 1950s, a major science conference in New Delhi described the separation of Burma, India, and Pakistan as a geological, geographical, and economic crime that flew in the face of nature and was unlikely to last for more than a century or two. Similar portents have been made repeatedly by others, less apt than scientists to take a detached view of political history. More recently, the tsunami of 2004, followed by the devastating earthquake of October 2005, which hit Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan, dramatically underlined the connectedness, the interconnectedness of a region divided by arbitrary frontiers drawn by the departed colonial masters. There are innumerable other pointers to the inherent organic unity of the region that cut against the grain of the dominant nationalist narratives of the nation states of South Asia. And my colleague here, Akmal, will certainly give us a lot more on the economic front, which I think he's the best suited to do for today's purpose. Now, far from facilitating the cooperative regional accommodation of the sort that Imtiaz just spoke about, based on recognition of their shared destiny, such signs have only served to strengthen the resolve of Britain's erstwhile colonies to defend their national sovereignty at all costs, whatever that means. Whatever the military masters of Myanmar had to gain from isolationism in an age of globalization, I think it's clear that India and Pakistan, despite their much doubted nuclear prowess, have lost much by their dogged refusal to arrive at some sort of understanding in the larger interests of the common destiny of the South Asian region. The combined weight of the political, economic, and environmental challenges facing the subcontinent requires bold and imaginative, out-of-the-box solutions. This has been all the more urgent, I believe, strongly, in the light of America's apparent determination, it seems, to take on the role of global policeman perpetually in pursuit of its national security interests. It reminds me of a piece that I've just come across by Mr. Bhutto in 1968. He spoke about the US's police punch policy, give economic incentives, and after that, slam your national security interests on whichever part of the world you happen to be involved with at that time. So there is an issue with the way America handles its national security interests, a debate that needs to be taken perhaps there. There are those who believe, and with growing credence, that the future balance of global power is going to be determined by policies adopted by key actors in the Indian Ocean regional space rather than in either the Atlantic or the Pacific Oceanic arenas. This is a major claim. Some analysts, of course, we know, have gone so far as to say that Washington has far more stake in preserving the state failure in Pakistan than in stabilizing either Afghanistan or, for that matter, Iraq or whatever other country that comes to mind. New Delhi and its backers in Washington have been skeptical about this line, arguing that this only emboldens Pakistan to take on more and more extreme lines. And I mean, this is on the basis of what its ambitious high command wants, which could be similar to covert operations of the sort that took place in Kargil, or even more controversially and tragically, the Mumbai 2008 model. Without a resolution of the long-standing Kashmir dispute, the gap between Pakistan's perceptions of its long-term security requirements vis-a-vis both India and Afghanistan and American strategic interests in the region, has been very difficult to negotiate, far less bridge. I mean, without Kashmir being sorted out and with Afghanistan remaining unaddressed. As the Americans contemplate their departure from Afghanistan, I think, and I agree here again with Mr. Alam, that it is imperative, more imperative than ever for both Islamabad and New Delhi to get the right end of the stick so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past vis-a-vis both each other as well as in relation to Kabul. The present historical conjuncture, therefore, represents a very rare opportunity for the two subcontinental neighbors to start a new chapter in their relationship. I don't just say this for the sake of rhetoric. I think it's an actual reality based on what I see as the reality on the ground. Whatever their formal stance, I think there are serious misgivings in both capitals about U.S. designs. Ambitious in conception and insensitive to other people's national sentiments, the American strategic doctrine in its various formulations essentially effectively invites the International Committee of Nations to dispense with their military and independent foreign policies by limiting interstate rivalries to commercial activities and leaving matters of global security, broadly speaking, in safe American hands. Now, ever since the unveiling of the more extreme versions of this doctrine under the Bush administration, the Western Academy has been rife with comparisons between the Roman Empire and the new American empire, as it were. Apart from being utterly premature, ahistorical, such comparisons take a very exaggerated view of what America's military superiority can achieve and belittle the significance of opposition to an empire that has yet to be fully established. The turmoil in Iraq, in the wake of an American victory, so-called, has more than adequately exemplified or amplified the limits of military power. If not quite an age of empire, Washington's military intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq ushered in what I call a wave of global opposition. The frantic readjustments made in several European capitals in response to Washington's unilateralism signaled the need for the nation states of Asia and the two nuclear states of South Asia in particular to go beyond their expressed wariness of the doctrine of preemptive action against anything and everything that threatens American interests. Any effective response will have to be based on a balanced assessment of the likely success or future of the American design, which, of course, of the new global order, which is in the making as we speak. Europe has taken the lead somewhat in actually resisting some of the American designs. I think France is a country that has done that quite effectively. In closer to home, I would say that Turkey is beginning to show very effective signs of going in a divergent way from what the U.S. Policy has been. The predominant mood, however, in the subcontinent, despite the rapidly changing international environment, has been that this has not affected our policy-hardened policymakers sitting in the secretariat walls of New Delhi, South Bloc in particular, and Islamabad. On the face of it, events since September 11th appear to have taken an even heavier toll on the proverbial failure of will and lack of vision so characteristic of the policymakers of both capitals. Yes, yet as the broader societal and political level, I think, and this is again a point that was made, and I think this is something that you can find just by walking on the streets of Lahore and in Amritsar, where I was recently, that there is a recognition that if India and Pakistan are not to be swept away by the imperatives of the new global order, cynics call it the new global disorder, they will have to rethink themselves anew and begin building bridges again across their age-old divides. What is lacking, however, I believe, is a clear vision that might enable the two rivals to achieve some semblance of peace and stability in the pursuit of greater security and prosperity for the region as a whole. Washington may harbor Xerxes' grand illusions of a Persian empire, but can hardly be unaware of the devastating outcome of the enterprise. To be sure, India and Pakistan are no modern-day Athens and Sparta, any more than Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives are the small Greek city-states who in 480 BC managed to overcome their internal difficulties and differences to inflict a crushing defeat on a more numerous and better equipped Persian force. The best they can do is to draw lessons from that glorious moment in Hellenic history that made the independence and prosperity of not just Greece, but I might add also of Europe possible. Instead of showing signs of wanting to fend off imperialistic designs on their resources and strategic assets, India and Pakistan have both mostly vied with each other to win American support in the war against Al-Qaeda. I think that's something that has to be underlined. Military-dominated Pakistan has been in the American pocket for the better part of its history, and having fallen out of it briefly in the 1980s over the nuclear question, was only too willing to dance to the tune of the old paymaster once the tide turned against the Taliban in Afghanistan. India, by contrast, has come a long way from its Cold War view of America as a blundering giant, devoid of finer feelings or respect for Asian sentiment in its desire to dominate others through its might or its wealth. The coalition led by the BJP not so long ago, while occasionally fuming at American policies for domestic consumption, was no less eager, if you recall, to tie the knot of an everlasting strategic partnership with the United States. The present Congress government in New Delhi, which likes to parade its Nehruvian legacy of non-alignment to keep alive the nationalist mantra of non-alignment, has been careful not to allow its growing ties with Washington endanger or seem to endanger India's economic self-interests. For all the talk about India and Pakistan grasping the nettle and starting afresh, there can be no wishing away the impress left by a long and contentious history on subcontinental minds. I would argue that in many ways the difficulty that India and Pakistan face in finding a solution is because not only does history weigh heavily on their minds, I think Indians and Pakistanis are conditioned in a way not to be able to learn from history in a way that might enable them to find more creative solutions for the present. So it's not just what happened in the past to India and Pakistan, which you referred to earlier, but how you remember it, what you make of it, how you think of it. That is what has made it difficult to break away. So I think what is most important for India and Pakistan is to realize the primary issues. I just want to give you a few examples because I don't want to harp. There is a prepared piece, but I'm going to diverge from that. The primary problem in Pakistan has been that they believe very strongly that India has never come to terms with the creation of Pakistan. It is this policy that justifies a national security paradigm that Pakistan constructed, I would argue, as early as the late 40s, which has remained by and large unchanged. If anything, it has morphed into a much, much more rigid paradigm than it was initially intended to do, which was that India is unreconciled to Pakistan, and therefore we must ensure against Indian designs at all costs, even if it means cutting off our own nose to spite our face. That's basically been the policy. And so that means that what does it tell you? That India wants to take over Pakistan is the view, and we must prevent that from happening. Now, the tragedy of that line is that I don't want to harp on my analysis of partition, but I will say that my findings suggested that, if anything, the Muslim League's demand for Pakistan was so problematic for the Congress High Command that it preferred to split India, divide, and get rid of the Muslims rather than share power. Now, the question that raises is, will they want it to come back in bits and pieces to return to India, as Pakistanis have always feared? Now, the question is that would deeply be problematic for India's Muslim question. I don't see how India would possibly want, after having solved the Muslim problem in 1947, to invite the return of the Muslim, to completely upset the Indian political balance. So I do think that this misconception that India is just waiting, either through the economic means or through other military means, to take over, has been the great fallacy that Pakistanis have been brought up with. But if you think hard about it, why the hell would India want you? Other than, India might want to keep you weak, but you have nothing but the prospect of fearsome Taliban, and with a friend like Imtiaz Alam, you would be really scared all the time about the threat that they pose, because that's what he harps on a lot. I'm referring to my Indian friends. So the point is that why would India want to take over? And in that respect, I just want to remind you that the whole policy, I mean, if we go back to history, since I am a historian and there may not be an opportunity to bring this up again,